Well, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. I know that she got to introduce me. I'm Odara Iswini. Would you guys?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shayna Jones-McGrone. I'm the founder and managing attorney of Artists in Law out of New York City.
And I'm Megan Gorman. I am the managing partner and founder of Checkers Financial Management in San Francisco, and we are a female-owned firm.
So, I did get tasked with having two people from the East Coast in New York. So, moderating this is going to be a lot of fun. They did ask me to potentially sit in the middle, as you said, two thorns of roses?
A thorn between two roses.
A thorn between two roses. I think that's what they started off with. Well, to start off, I know that we have a lot of advisors here, and one of the things that we've seen within the industry is people talking about succession planning. So could you guys give a little bit of an insight on how important it is for just small business owners in general to actually think about estate planning on the front end as they start their business?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think one of the best ways to do business, and really, if you can do this with your life, is start out thinking about what the end is. What's your end goal? How are you going to get there? And then reverse engineering to it. And then, of course, if you're thinking about that, your succession planning is going to influence what that is. Are you looking to be bought out? Are you looking for the next generation to come in? So if you understand what the end is, then you can move forward with a plan in order to get you to that goal. So business succession also really goes lock, stock, and barrel, really interlocking with what your estate plan is. It's not going to be complete to have a personal estate plan for your family and you don't have a plan for your business, which for small business owners can often be your biggest asset.
Yeah.
I agree completely with Shayna. And like a lot of you, I own an RIA. And I'm a California-based RIA. And so I'm going to give you two tips that my team has thought about with our operating agreement. California is a community property state. You should know if your state is a separate property state or community property state. But in our operating agreement, we require our partners to keep their ownership in our RIA as separate property because we do not want our RIA ownership being caught up in any divorce proceedings. So it's really, really important to partition it out. I think the second thing is you sort of have to go into this planning for worst case scenario, right? Somebody dies young and they're an owner of an RIA. And so looking at things like life insurance, those types of things are really, really important for succession agreements. And I think it's one of those things that once you do it for yourself and your firm, it's much easier to advise others. That's what I found in my practice.
Yeah, could you guys expound upon what some of those estate planning strategies or documents that people should be aware of on the front end as they're trying to start this process as far as small business owners?
Are you talking about estate planning in general?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So with estate planning, really when you have something that's comprehensive, you're going to have a set of documents that's going to address the disposition or the transfer of your assets after you die. So generally we're talking about a will or a trust or a combination of the two. You may have more than one trust depending upon what your net worth is and what your plan is. But there's got to be some plan, some set of documents that address post-death asset distribution. And then, of course, you're going to want to plan for what could be a worst case scenario. What happens if you're incapacitated? And what are those documents that are going to address who's going to be your agents to handle your financial life, as well as your healthcare decisions if you're incapacitated. So we call those financial and healthcare powers of attorney. In New York specifically, they're called your financial power of attorney and your advanced healthcare directives, which includes 3 documents: your healthcare proxy, your living will, as well as your HIPAA release. So those are some of the foundational documents. We can absolutely go more in depth into different types or different trust planning techniques, but you're essentially talking about will and trust-based planning as well as your powers of attorney as some of the documents, some of the main documents.
What else would you say to that, Megan?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Shayna's an attorney who actually drafts, right? I'm an attorney, but I don't draft. I farm it all out. But I think for financial planning, if you're not doing estate planning with your clients, you're not really doing financial planning.
That's a word. Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, Megan, look, I don't have legal training, right? I'm afraid from a liability standpoint to creep into those waters. But I think one of the key fundamentals to remember with estate planning is we hold the keys to the castle. So estate planning, one, we know the relationships. We know the children that are problematic. We know the fact that somebody might be supporting their parents or a sibling. And we have all of that in our files. Where a lot of times when you go to an attorney, they're seeing a client for a transaction. They're just getting a sliver of the pie. We see the whole picture. So relationship knowledge is really key in estate planning. I think the other thing that we do incredibly well is organizational planning, right? You know, documents are one thing, but making sure things are titled appropriately is really important. As I've said, we're in California, so California, if you're not having your assets titled in a revocable trust, God help you with the probate system. It's incredibly expensive. And so those are some of the basic blocking and tackling we can do there. And then I think the really important thing that all of us can do is really understand beneficiary designation planning. The Secure Act in 2019 came out right before pandemic. So we all heard about it, and then all of a sudden it was like PPP, stimulus, right? We all got diverted to other things. But understanding how IRAs and other beneficiary designated accounts have to flow and work from a tax standpoint is really important. And I'm going to be honest, the IRS has not been friendly to us in giving us regulations on how that 10-year payout would have to happen if it doesn't pass to a spouse. So again, we get to do some of the fun part of estate planning. So I always tell people, don't be afraid to be a scuba diver. Don't just snorkel, scuba dive, get into this. Because if you have an attorney like Shayna on your side, you can go to her to get the guidance and you help with the execution.
Yeah, so,
Let me just
go ahead.
add one thing. So I think Megan makes a great point. I can definitely understand how advisors would feel as if they're stepping outside of their role when they address that estate planning portion. But I do agree with Megan. If you are not at least talking with your clients about it, you're really not doing comprehensive planning with them. And let me also say this, you know, so much of what you do is relationship building and getting to know your client. And when you get to know those issues, I think really as attorneys, we really are looking for you to, there are just certain things that you can issue spot, right? Look, depending upon your client's net worth, then you know potentially that there's going to be a federal and or a state tax issue, right? If you know that your child has special needs, then you know that there are going to be some of those issues. For all of your clients, and let me just give you this, no matter what the net worth of your client is, if you are not talking to your clients about long-term care planning, then you are significantly doing them a disservice. And that can be addressed in so many ways, right? On the insurance side, on investment side for planning for that, and on the estate planning side. So I think, and I'm also going to say this, I really do think that the best way for us to do our job is in a collaborative fashion. I love working with planners because I feel like it's better for the client when we work together and have a relationship. It benefits everyone. So to the extent that you can build those relationships with attorneys, you understand the issues, and then on my side, when I look at a client, I can also come back to the planner and talk with you about things that I might think might be helpful for you. That's really best for everyone.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You work with a lot of planners.
I do.
What percentage of them do it right in working with you?
I'm gonna say this with so much love in my heart, not many. But let me say this, right? It really is, it's not that they don't want to, it really is just education, a lack of education. So I consider it to be my role to make my planners my friends and to give them the education that they need in order to help their clients as well as to help me. We want everyone to do the best possible, so.
So with this being what we need to know with the estate plan, I want to ask you guys two separate questions. One, with you being an attorney who actually drafts the documents, what are some of the big oversights that you see as far as advisors, what they don't really hone in on whenever it comes to the estate planning side with their clients that you wish that they would actually talk a little bit more about with their clients or actually bring out to you?
So I'm going to say this. I have had a couple of advisors come to me, or a couple of clients come to me from advisors. I won't say a couple, it's been several. And I will get an understanding of one set of assets from the planner, and then the client and I will talk. And I talk a lot with people. I want to get to know you first before we do anything. and then all of a sudden somebody will pop up with another asset, right? So to me, that signals a couple of things. That signals that the relationship with the planner has not potentially gone as deep as it could have for a variety of reasons. Not necessarily that it's just the planner, right? But also that certain things are being missed. So I had one particular example where the asset that the client pulled out of his back pocket was a couple of $1 million that then put him over the New York State estate tax threshold,
wow.
which completely changes the matrix of both his financial planning and his estate planning. So my encouragement would be to get as deep with your clients as possible and to build that relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that, right, making sure you have all the assets on the table. And then you know, I can't necessarily say in terms of documents because I'm not putting that on the planner to figure out what documents are needed. But to the extent that you really have a great understanding of what's happening in that person's family is going to be imperative, right? So do they have a good relationship with the children so we can understand, are the assets that they want to distribute really what they want? Are the agents that they want? Are you going to have a fight such that you need a no contest clause? For me, no contest clauses are paramount in any document, no matter what the family is like, because when people die, money makes people act really funny. So for me, I want to do as many things on the outset to make sure that we don't end up in litigation and waste people's time and money and all the hard work we put into planning.
I'm really glad that you said that because even as an advisor, I know that advisors, sometimes we can focus on AUM, but a lot of times we don't even focus on the assets that our clients have that we don't even talk about. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it could be a good business practice of generating more revenue, you know, honestly, of bringing more assets in. Megan, I did want to ask you, with you being an attorney, but now coming over to the good side of the industry and being an advisor, what are some things that you can see now being on the other side that advisors should really focus in on? Because you actually get us a little bit more now. You know, I understand that you're not a planner and you don't, you know, deal with the day-to-day of like the investment trading and all that we have to do. So what are some of those insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think Shayna brings it up really well about family dynamics. So I'm going to give two things that I'm doing with clients right now in estate plans. One, I'm a Gen Xer, and everybody in Gen X and late boomer, we're all dealing with aging parents. And so one of the worst fears, I think, when you get into it with clients is they die before their aging parents. I have this going on in New Jersey right now with my mother, right? So there is the ability to get that out of a client, understand where their fears are, and encourage them to talk to the attorney or bring it up to the attorney about setting up a trust that pops up if you die before your parents, where your parent has access to assets, but at their death, reversion to your heirs, right, to your children. I think it's a great tool. It gives peace of mind to know that your parent will be cared for. The other thing I'm doing with estate plans, and it goes to family dynamics, is I've had a couple of clients die, and I've also had a lot of clients that have longevity. So for my clients with longevity, I'm hearing things like, why am I waiting till 90 to give my kids the inheritance, right? Maybe I want to do some stuff now. But for other clients, what we've talked about is what happens if one spouse dies at 60, I actually had this happen, and the other spouse lives another 20, 30 years and might get remarried, right? To what Shayna talked about family dynamics, you want to manage the kids. So one idea you can bring up is at the first death, if there's enough assets, which you could run because you're doing Monte Carlo analysis, do you make a gift to the kids at the first death? Keep them happy so that if dad wants to go get remarried, and by the way, dad always wants to get remarried, mom never does. Sorry, boys, that's how it works. You end up sort of diffusing some of the tension in the relationship. It also gives you a chance to work with the kids to teach them about the money. And so there's that big issue in our industry about when it transfers to the next generation, it often leaves the door of our practice. This is a good way of keeping it in, where you're working with multiple generations of the family.
Yeah, Shayna, I do want to ask, for you guys who don't know, I got to speak with Shayna a couple of weeks ago and got to hear a little bit more about her story, which I was so encouraged because she has all the passion in the world, and it really did encourage me, one, to learn more about estate planning as an advisor, but two, I was talking to her a little bit about my parents because both my parents are immigrants, and anybody who has immigrant friends or parents or families, you know that your parents don't tell you anything. You usually figure out everything like, 30 years later whenever your aunt and uncle tells you at the dinner table. But I say all that to say, what are some encouraging things that you would say to family members who really don't feel comfortable and engaging their parents about estate planning conversations and actually getting those documents set in place? Like, what should advisors do to really encourage their clients to talk to their parent about the amount of wealth that they're inheriting? Or do you feel like that is even an important conversation to have?
That's an excellent question, and that's such an important conversation. I think that what I have seen across, and I'm going to say this about Future Proof, I have really loved the fact that we have talked about so many different segments of society and what our clients may face in those segments. One thing that I will say that I think is uniform across people is that no one really wants to talk about their death. And people feel like, superstitious or not, that the talking about and the planning about their death is a portending to their death, as in they're ushering it forward, right? So what I have done with clients is, I think we all can see, we've seen it in our own lives and we may see it with others, that when you make it about someone else and you take the focus off of you, you will do things that you may not do for yourself. So I often will have people reframe the context of moving it out of their own death and thinking about what they want to do for their loved ones.
That's good.
What legacy they want to set up for them, how they want to change and influence their lives. What challenges do they want to make sure that their children and other loved ones don't face because they've taken the time to put a plan together to care for them? And that often moves a lot of people forward, because when you say to anyone, do you want to leave your children with a probate mess that's going to cost them time, money, and heartache? Do you want to squander the legacy that you've worked your entire life to build? People will change. They'll flip when you start to reframe the conversation that way. So I think it's important to do that, to make it a lot less about them and a lot more about other people, and that's helpful to move the situation forward.
That is so good. Megan, I know that well, not even just you, but I know 2026 is coming a lot quicker than we all expected.
Yes.
Could you talk about some different estate planning strategies that planners should really start implementing now, as there is probably the potential of the estate tax going back to where it was?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to keep your eyes on, just as a little bit of background, we, under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, right now, if you have an estate $12,060,000 or less, you're tax-free. So for a married couple, $25 million or less, no estate tax. December 31st, 2025, they're going to roll back the unified credit to the Obama era of $5 million plus inflation. So this is really important because there is a group of people out there as clients who today don't have an estate tax issue, but who might in a few years. So one of the techniques I'm loving right now, in fact, I'm about to have one signed today, and the fact that the market was down yesterday was great, is what's called a grantor retained annuity trust, a GRAT.
Good old grats.
A good old GRAT. And GRATs are awesome when the markets are down. And so, going back to the 2020 crash, I had a number of clients do GRATs where they took assets, and in this instance, I had a client take $5 million. We put it into a GRAT, and it's an account that basically is still in their social security number. But at the end of the first year, on the anniversary, you take back $2.5 million. And on the second anniversary, you take back another $2.5 million. Now, I'm simplifying this for this discussion. But what's left there, the appreciation, and in this case, it was almost $3 million, we passed on to the kids income tax-free, gift tax-free, and estate tax-free. So there's this really amazing technique out there. So when markets are down, estate planning is a really great moment to talk to people. And that's obviously a technique for high net worth, ultra high net worth. But to be honest, another great estate planning technique, 529 plan funding. I was working on one yesterday, and I use Vanguard a lot of the time, and the Vanguard fund is down like 14%. And I'm like,
wait,
perfect.
They're right across.
Oh,
I think that
it's
might
okay.
be-
Everything's down. Don't worry, it's not just them. But for wealth planning, the idea of taking cash and having them move it out of the estate into the 529 plan, because the 529 plan will not be included in your estate at your death. It's a great time to buy and a great time to move assets. So I think this is like the right time for wealthy people to be doing some of these techniques. And it's not them just doing it. It's more about us as advisors bringing it up, right? It's spotting the issue, because a lot of times clients are like, great idea, not my jam. But the fact that you're being proactive, the fact that you're telling them what others are doing, you don't want them to read about it in the Wall Street Journal and call you. That's I always hate when that happens. I'm like, oh, I didn't do my job. You want to be proactive on this. And this is the right type of market where moving wealth is really important.
Well, I can't see the projector, so I'm going to get a little bit closer to read this first Q&A. And you're, thank you. In your opinion, what is the best way for an advisor to approach you to build a partnership from scratch?
Oh my gosh, the best way to approach me is really just to reach out. Super accessible. I love talking to people. But let me just say this in general, right? Because I'm not every attorney. I think the best thing to do is one of the ways is to contact someone on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn I've found to be an amazing place where I've met a lot of great partners. Any networking event, and really just connecting with them as a person. I have found throughout the entirety of my practice that when I can connect with someone as a person, we're going to always have a better relationship. It's always going to go better for everyone involved. It's really not that hard. We're all just professionals. We all have a fiduciary duty to our clients, and we all want the best for them.
And all I'm going to add to that, first of all, Shayna's easy to connect with. She's great to talk to, and she's a great resource. But I think one of the things to think about when you're connecting with an attorney is, we're here at a festival, right? This team has done a phenomenal job providing us with an experience. But part of what we should take away from this is, when we get in the estate planning path, partnering with the right attorney to provide the correct client experience is so important. And I think, having those discussions of how are we going to do this, who's going to be the quarterback, what do you want me to do, what role should each of us play to prep to work with a client is just as important as putting the client in front of Shayna or an attorney.
What would you say is the level of competence an advisor should try to get to whenever it comes to their knowledge of estate planning? Because I know that there might be some advisors who find that more interesting, or they might get more continuing education with estate planning, and there's some advisors who just don't want to touch it at all. What would you say is the level that most advisors should reach whenever it comes to their competence?
I mean, first of all, make sure you have your estate plan done. It's hard to give advice on something you've never done yourself. And unfortunately, the older we get, the more we come in contact with estate planning because family members die. And when somebody dies in your family, even though you might not touch estate planning, they always call you because you're the finance person and the finance person knows. So I think it's doing your estate plan and doing reading. There's a lot of great resources out there, from Money to Wall Street Journal to CNBC to Forbes, that talk about these things. And I think that often just helps is the ability to spot issues. And the one thing I'll also say with clients is, if you're afraid to get too into estate planning, the healthcare directive is a very powerful tool for you to get your feet wet, because it's a lot about choice of what happens to your body. And let me tell you, being a woman in 2022, we have a lot of points of view on that, right? So these are documents that clients really want to get into and want to talk about. And in that document are funeral plans. And I am awesome at planning parties. And a funeral is, in a weird way, your final party. Getting people into that often breaks the ice, so then you can bring them to someone like Shayna.
Well, I just want to get an invite to the next party. That's what I want to know.
So I'm also going to say this. So no one expects that a new planner is going to have the same amount of in-depth experience as someone who is a CFP or, is in the latter part of their career. What I would say is, of course, you need to know that every one of your clients needs to have some plan. And I'm also going to say this, that more of your clients than not are probably going to need trust-based planning. So you don't want, as I've seen, multimillionaires walking around with a will. It's just really a no-go, right? So if you just know something as specific as that, you've got to have a plan in place. You're probably talking about trust planning. You definitely want to have some powers of attorney in place on both sides, financial and healthcare. But then, of course, as you become more seasoned and you have that deep understanding into investment products, it really is a symbiotic relationship. I had a planner approach me recently with a client. He was not involved in the process, and that's a particular relationship between him and his client. But, he approached me and he said, well, does this trust have X, Y, and Z language in relation to this type of product, right? That's super helpful, right? Because I can say, and I can look back and say, yes, it is there. But if you think that there is something else, if there's something else that and we need to have some updated language, that's super helpful as well, right? So it's an exchange on both sides.
And I do want to ask, in addition, I know that with advisors usually focusing on the high net worth side of things, whenever it comes to financial planning, we we then don't realize how that actually affects us being able to just talk to the common person. So what are some different estate planning strategies that advisors should focus on just for the common individual? You know, if it is their family member who does not have millions of dollars, what are some different estate planning topics you would talk to them about?
Yeah, so what I'm going to say, the first one is life insurance, because frankly, life insurance creates an immediate estate. So you may not be high net worth, but you've got a policy, you're able to fund some form of a permanent or even a term policy, depending upon what the technique is.
Say it again.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you know that policy's paying out a million, even $500,000. That's generationally changing money for a family. And then if you set your planning up properly, such that if you put it in a trust, and then that trust, it remains in force for the generation that comes afterward and allows them to do certain things, you've changed the landscape of a family. So I think life insurance is one of the most amazing tools that you can use for anyone at any level. So that's one of the first things I'm going to say.
And Megan, I do want to ask you a really quick
Yeah.
last question before we open it up for Q&A. With honestly, with the pandemic expediting this, majority of the advisors here, I would say, we don't only serve individuals who are within our own city. We probably serve people across the nation.
Right.
So could you talk about the importance of actually engaging with estate planners across the nation and how that actually
Yeah, I mean,
provides benefit?
I have attorneys that I work with all over the country, and it's not just where the client is located, right? When you get into ultra high net worth, it also depends which state has the preferential law, like Delaware or South Dakota. So knowing the right attorneys there. So I think it's a lot of building a Rolodex in that sense. And it's important because I know a lot of us have clients moving to Florida. I mean, I've got a ton moving to Florida. And if you have a client moving to Florida, you should immediately flag the issue that Florida has some quirky estate planning. And to really be Floridian, you have to have a Florida-based estate plan with a Floridian as a personal, as your personal representative. Very quirky, but I will tell you, I won a New York audit, and one of the things that helped is we had a Floridian estate plan. So it's really just building your network out there. And I know a lot of people here on FinTwit. The sister group to that is Tax Twitter, which is also a lot of estate planners as well. So come join us on that hashtag, because we are all across the country and we often know attorneys in those areas.
Perfect. Let's try to get a couple of rapid fire questions in before we end. So for long-term care, are you suggesting insurance or modeling elevated healthcare costs later in life?
So do you want
Yeah.
to take that? Or?
So I think that there are a couple of ways to do it, and it depends upon what works for the client. So you know, on the insurance side, you can either have your standalone policies, which can tend to be very expensive and potentially cost prohibitive for a client, or you can have which may often be better, a rider on their insurance, on their life insurance policy. So I think it's you have to model out the cost. You have to look at what the exact plan says. But the other thing you have to be really clear about is knowing what the costs of long-term care are in your state. So in New York, there are generally three big buckets of long-term care. Do you need home health aides? Do you need assisted living? Or do you need nursing home care? And generally the cost goes up incrementally based upon which of the three you're doing, right? So you need to know what the costs are, because you have to know if the payout on the long-term care policy is actually going to equate to the level of care that your client needs. And if that policy isn't going to do it, what's your backup to get them the gap? That's one thing. And then in terms of, so I think insurance is one way to do it, and then there are several other ways to do it, right? For those of you who are doing high net worth clients, of course, Medicaid should not be what you are doing, right?
Yeah.
But there may be some clients for which Medicaid planning is important, and then there are some other techniques that you need on the insurance
And
side.
I just want to add
ahead.
really quick to that. I think when we're advisors, right, we're running the Monte Carlo analysis. We should run analysis assuming years where expenses are high for healthcare. And so I think Shayna's approach is one part of the seesaw you want to find balance on. The other thing is encouraging our clients to do health savings accounts and taking the money and investing them. And I will tell you, both Schwab, Fidelity, there's a lot of great platforms for HSAs now that a lot of us use in our RIA practices. But managing the HSA can be just a nice complement to the long-term care plan, because your HSA can cover regular medical costs, which today are estimated for a healthy 65-year-old couple at $300,000 till they die. And so it's important to also factor that into the estate planning, because an HSA can pass from one spouse to another, but it cannot pass generationally. So you have to be able to make sure you use the money in the health savings account.
Awesome. Well, since I'm technically Gen Z and I have 15 seconds left, I have to ask you guys about different crypto assets in your estate plan. I'm joking. Perfect.
Well, no,
thank
it's actually a big, big issue. It's
Yeah,
a huge
it is.
issue. Case law is evolving. I teach law school. It's one of my favorite segments in law school to teach because it's trying. You have to remember, in estate planning, we have estate law and we have family law, and a lot of times we pull from other segments of law to create solutions.
Right.
So it is being worked on, and there will be cases that will help guide us. But again, knowing what assets your clients have and giving it to someone like Shayna is really important.
And let me just also say one thing in relation to that. This is for crypto and any other digital assets. This may seem really rudimentary, but please make sure when you plan with your clients, when you talk with an estate attorney, that there's a repository of all of their digital assets, passwords, logins, and all that stuff. You'd be amazed at how many things are lost because that's not wrapped up.
Absolutely. Well, can you guys please give it up for Megan and Shannon? They did a phenomenal job. Look at them. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it.